Kayla wiped the sweat from her brow, glancing across the gym at Aaron. He was focused, curling dumbbells like it was second nature. She hesitated for a moment before walking over, adjusting her earbuds to act casual. Their conversation had been brief but pleasant the other night. He had that natural charm. Relaxed, confident, the type who never had to try too hard. As she approached, he smiled. "Hey, I remember you. Remind me, what's your favorite machine again?" "Anything that doesn't make me feel like I'm dying," Kayla laughed, brushing her ponytail behind her shoulder. A few more lighthearted exchanges passed before Aaron asked, "You should add me on Snapchat." It was the perfect way to keep things going, and she didn't hesitate. They exchanged snap codes, and she left the gym with a little flutter in her chest. This could actually be something, she thought to herself with a warm glow to her face. That night, her phone chimed. Aaron added you back. She grinned, snapping a picture of her cozy spot on the couch with her cat. "Relaxing after a long day. You?" He responded quickly. "Just finished a late-night workout. What's your usual routine?" The conversation was easy, flowing into the next day and the day after that. They talked about their favorite exercises, their work schedules, and weekend plans. It felt natural. But soon, the conversation started to take strange turns. "Do you live with your parents or by yourself?" Aaron asked one night. But this night was different. Kayla didn't see Aaron at the gym that night. It felt a bit personal, but she brushed it off. "I live with a roommate." "You should send me a picture of your place. I bet it's nice," he sent with 3 winking faces. Her stomach twisted at the request. Something about it didn't sit right, but she pushed the feeling aside. Maybe he was just making conversation. But the next message was worse. "You never mentioned what time your roommate's usually out." Just curious. Kayla felt a twinge of discomfort creep up her spine. That was when she began to notice subtle changes in their conversation. The tone shifted. His questions became more personal, almost invasive. A few nights later, Kayla sat at her desk, scrolling mindlessly through social media. She glanced at her phone, ignoring another Snap notification from Aaron. The unease had become too much to ignore. Every message from him felt like another layer of her privacy being stripped away piece by piece. As she prepared for bed, her phone buzzed again. This time, the notification felt heavier, like a looming threat. She opened the app cautiously. There it was, a photo. A picture of her car, parked right outside her apartment, taken from across the street. Her breath hitched in her throat as she stared at the image. The caption read, "Nice ride." The message said with 3 winky faces. Kayla's heart raced. She hadn't told him where she lived. She hadn't told him about her car. Her hand shook as she texted back, "How do you know where I live?" The response came almost instantly. "You mentioned it." She hadn't. She knew she hadn't. Kayla's mind spiraled, trying to rationalize what was happening. Had she been too trusting? Had she let some details slip without realizing? It didn't make sense. The next few days passed in a blur of anxiety. Every sound outside her window felt like someone watching her. Every footstep in the hallway a potential threat. She stopped responding to Aaron's messages, hoping he would just go away. But the more she ignored him, the more frequent the notifications became. Then came the final blow. It was a normal evening. Kayla sat curled up in her apartment, trying to relax when her phone chimed with a new snap. She hesitated, not wanting to look, but she couldn't help it. The picture was of her living room, from inside her apartment. Her heart pounded as she looked around, but everything appeared normal. The message that followed sent her into a full-blown panic. "I told you I'd always be close by." Kayla bolted to the door, checking the locks, her hands trembling as she dialed the police. But just as she was about to hit send, Her phone buzzed again. Calling the cops won't help you. They can't keep me away. Kayla's breath caught in her throat, and her vision blurred with panic. There was no way she could ignore this now. This person had been inside her apartment. Her safe space wasn't safe anymore. She dropped her phone, her mind racing in 100 directions. What could she do? Every instinct screamed for her to get out, to run. But run where? She bolted up from the couch, pacing back and forth, her thoughts spiraling. Her chest tightened with panic, and she found it harder and harder to breathe. Her hands trembled as she grabbed her phone again, dialing 911. But just before hitting the call button, doubt crept in. He said the cops couldn't help. He was always ahead of her. What if they couldn't find him in time? What if he was watching her right now? She glanced around her apartment, every shadow suddenly ominous, every creak of the floor a potential threat. Was he still here? She checked the doors, then the windows, her breath coming in ragged gasps. She knew the police were her only option, but her hands were shaking so badly she could barely dial. The moment the operator answered, Kayla blurted out everything, her voice cracking with fear, barely able to form sentences. Someone's been in my apartment. I don't know how, but they sent me a picture, and they've been stalking me for days. Please, I don't feel safe. The operator stayed calm, guiding her through her panic. Is your door locked? Are you in a safe place right now? I think so. I don't know, Kayla stammered. I've locked everything, but he knows everything about me. Please, just send someone. I don't know what to do. Stay on the line. We're sending a unit to your location now. The seconds that followed felt like hours. She clutched her phone like a lifeline, every fiber of her being waiting for the sound of sirens to cut through the night. But instead, the silence weighed heavy. Her heart pounded in her ears, each beat louder than the last. She was convinced that any moment now, he would make his move. That he'd step out from the shadows, and suddenly, the doorknob rattled. Kayla froze. Her blood turned to ice as the sound echoed through the apartment. She wasn't imagining it. Someone was trying to get in. She backed up against the far wall, her eyes locked on the door as the handle jiggled again. Her heart pounded harder, her breath shallow and rapid. She wanted to scream, but the sound caught in her throat, leaving her paralyzed with terror. Every second felt like an eternity. Then, just as suddenly as it started, the rattling stopped. The silence that followed was suffocating. She didn't move. She didn't dare. A few agonizing minutes later, the knock came at the door. This time, heavy and authoritative. Kayla jumped, her heart nearly leaping out of her chest. It was the police. She could finally breathe again, rushing to the door and letting them in. 2 officers stepped inside, their calm, steady presence doing little to ease the whirlwind of emotions inside her. She explained everything, showing them the messages, the photos. They took her statement and looked around the apartment, but found no immediate signs of forced entry. The lock seemed intact. No broken windows, no signs of anyone having been inside. But Kayla knew better. She could feel it. Whoever's been doing this is playing with you, one of the officers said. We'll keep an eye on the area tonight. But if they contact you again, you need to call us right away. Kayla nodded, but inside, a part of her was breaking. The police couldn't do anything, and she knew it. Her stalker had already told her as much. After they left, she sat in her living room, feeling more alone and vulnerable than ever. Every shadow, every creak of the floorboards was a reminder that her privacy had been violated, and no one, not even the police, could keep her safe. She couldn't sleep. She couldn't even lie down. The night stretched on forever, her mind replaying the rattling doorknob, the messages, The haunting possibility that he was still out there, watching. The next morning, Kayla was done. She couldn't take it anymore. She needed to confront Aaron face to face and figure out how he was doing this. When she got to the gym, her heart was in her throat, her stomach in knots. She found him instantly. He was back at the weights, his usual calm, friendly self. "Aaron," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "We need to talk." He looked up, surprised but smiling. "Hey, what's up?" Her hand shook as she pulled out her phone. "I don't know what's going on, but these messages you've been sending, they're not funny." Aaron blinked, confused. "Messages? What are you talking about?" She opened Snapchat, showing him the string of messages, the pictures, the terrifying details. Aaron's brow furrowed as he scrolled through them. "Kayla, I haven't sent you anything," he said, his voice flat with shock. "I don't even use Snapchat like that. I never added you back." Her stomach dropped. "What?" "I'm serious," he said, showing her his phone. "This isn't my account. Someone else must have added you." Kayla's world spun. She'd been talking to a complete stranger the entire time. Someone who knew everything about her, someone who was inside her apartment. Her legs felt weak, and her mind struggled to process the truth. The person she'd been confiding in wasn't Aaron. It was someone else, someone dangerous. "Someone's been inside my place," she whispered, her voice cracking. Aaron's face darkened with concern, but he had no answers. "You need to go to the police." Kayla was in a state of distraught and horrified at the thought that someone random has been watching her, and even more horrified that the police couldn't help her. She rushed to left the gym in a hurry, rushing to her car. She wanted to head home, but not before making sure she had stopped to pick up a taser and mace on the way home. Kayla didn't wait another second. Before heading home, she went to the police again, explaining everything in shaky breaths. The officers seemed concerned, but the digital trail was cold. Whoever had been talking to her had disappeared, the account deleted before they could trace it. "They always disappear," the officer said grimly. "It happens more than you think. These people target their victims online and then vanish." That night, Kayla locked every door and window, feeling a bit more secure after speaking with the police. But the unease lingered. She was more careful now, triple-checking everything. But her phone still buzzed relentlessly. Then, just as she was beginning to calm down, a notification appeared from a new Snapchat account. "Stranger 119 added you." Her heart skipped a beat. With shaking hands, she opened it. A photo, taken from outside her window. The caption read, "You really thought you could get away?" Her mind raced. He was back. He was still watching her. She tried to calm herself, but the panic was rising too fast. She blocked the account, her breath coming in shallow gasps. Another buzz. A picture of her bedroom door. "You can't hide from me." A cold shiver ran down her spine. Her throat tightened. It felt like there was no escape, nowhere to run. But she had to do something. Frantic, she grabbed her bag and threw on a hoodie, rushing to the gym. Aaron. Maybe he could help. Maybe somehow this could all be a sick misunderstanding, and Aaron could explain everything. Maybe, just maybe, he was connected to this in a way that would make it all stop. When she arrived, her heart was pounding with anticipation and fear. She spotted Aaron across the gym, casually lifting weights as if nothing in the world was wrong. She swallowed hard, her feet feeling heavy as she made her way over to him. "Aaron," she said, her voice strained. He turned to face her, his expression casual, if a bit surprised. "Kayla, hey, I'm surprised to see you here. Are you okay? Did you figure out what was going on? He said, wiping sweat from his forehead with a towel. She couldn't hold it in any longer. The words tumbled out. What's going on? The message is, why are you doing this? You're the only one I gave my Snapchat out to in the last few days. If this is some twisted prank, please, I'm begging you to end it. Aaron blinked, confused. Kayla, I thought you were cool, but obviously you have some serious problems going on, and I'd rather not be accused of your crazy story. Seek help before you put yourself in further danger, or more importantly, put me in danger. Please, don't contact me again. I told you I never actually added you back on Snapchat, and I mean that. I truthfully haven't had the time to pursue someone. Don't take this as a threat, but the next time you approach me in the gym, I will notify the staff and tell them you are harassing me. Kayla's chest tightened. Her phone buzzed again in her hand, and she glanced down instinctively. Another message from the stalker. You're wasting your time, Kayla. Honestly, how dumb can you be? Kayla's stomach dropped. The room spun around her, a dizzying sense of reality slipping from her grasp. If Aaron hadn't sent those messages, who had? Before she could process it, another message popped up on her screen, sending a bolt of fear straight through her chest. Told you he couldn't help you. Her heart pounded in her throat. Every muscle in her body tensed. She took a step back, her mind racing, trying to understand what was happening. She was spiraling, lost in a sea of confusion and terror. Aaron was saying something to her, but she couldn't hear him. All she could hear was the deafening thud of her pulse in her ears. Another message came through. I know you're reading this, Kayla. Turn around. Her breath hitched. Slowly, against every instinct screaming at her not to, she glanced over her shoulder. No one was there. Just the open space of the gym behind her, filled with people working out. But she felt it. A presence. The weight of eyes on her, watching her every move. Her phone buzzed again, and this time, the message was worse than anything she'd seen so far. Nice gray hoodie, by the way. Kayla froze. Her blood ran cold, and the room seemed to tilt under her feet. She was wearing a gray hoodie. The room was filled with people, yet it felt like every single person was in on it, like they all knew, and no one would save her. Shaking, she stumbled toward the locker room, her mind racing. He was here. He was close. And no matter what she did, no matter how many times she called for help, he was always a step ahead. In the locker room, she leaned against the sink, gripping the edge of the counter so hard her knuckles turned white. Her reflection stared back at her, wide-eyed and pale, like a stranger. She pulled out her phone again, her hands trembling uncontrollably, and typed a message. Who are you? Why are you doing this? For a long moment, there was no response. Then, slowly, the typing bubble appeared, taunting her. Because I can. Tears welled up in her eyes. Her entire body shook with fear. She was trapped, completely at this stranger's mercy, with no idea how to escape. The phone slipped from her hand and clattered to the floor. She felt her legs give way, collapsing onto the cold tile. Another buzz. Look behind you. Kayla's breath caught in her throat. She didn't want to look. Every instinct told her to run, to scream, to fight back. But she couldn't. Her muscles were frozen in place, paralyzed by the sheer weight of her terror. Slowly, she forced herself to turn, her eyes moving in a jerky, frantic motion toward the locker room door. It swung open, the familiar squeak of the hinges echoing in the cold, sterile air. Nothing. No one. And then, one final message came through, sealing her fate. You're mine now. There's no escape. In that instant, something snapped inside her. Kayla scrambled to her feet, her chest heaving with sobs as she bolted for the door. She didn't care where she went, didn't care who saw her. She just needed to get out, to get away. But as she burst through the locker room door and ran into the dark lot, she quickly tried to get into her car to rush to the police station for the last time. Tears filled her eyes to the point where she could barely see. She tried starting her car, but it would turn on. Just when she tried to crank it for the third time, she received yet another message. Going somewhere? It said, with 3 winking faces. And in a flash, someone grabbed Kayla from her back seat. It was him, the one who had been contacting her, the one who had been asking all the invasive questions, the one who had been following her every move, the one who was already 3 steps ahead. They tussled for a few moments, but his strength was unmatched. Kayla screamed, begging for help, but everyone was in the gym. Her cries drowned out by the sound of weights hitting the floor. The last thing she would ever hear was the sound of her own breath, stifled by a presence that had always been watching, waiting. The price of trusting a stranger online. Days passed and Aaron never saw Kayla after that at the gym. He started to get worried, but ultimately figured that she had went to seek professional help or at least somehow get her life together. As he finished his workout one night and headed home, he turned on the news as he prepared a protein shake. There he saw the familiar face of the girl he once knew, Kayla. The headline read, "Girl linked to an unsolved murder case. Suspect still on the loose." Aaron's stomach dropped. He couldn't believe his eyes. Then a notification appeared on his phone, forcing him back to reality for a moment. "Kayla Girl Rocks added you on Snapchat." Then a message appeared in the chat. It said, "Hey Aaron, she tried to warn you, but it's okay. Now you're next."